Welcome, class, to week 4. Here we are, and you guys are doing great. You're doing great, and I really appreciate I'm seeing your hard work. I just want to say a little bit is that I've been a little slow on being able to respond in some of the ways that I'd like to with some of you, and I've also been a little bit behind on the grading. Excuse me. And so, but I just took off an extra day of my other work. I've been working 4 days a week at my other job. I just, I now have 40 more new students coming in, and I've been a little bit behind on your guys' grading the way I like to do it. So, this hopefully should be fixed a little bit. And Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I can focus on grading and responding to any of your guys' needs. Okay, so this 3-day chunks will be great, and then I have Sundays that I can do that as well. So I just want to mention that. For exam 1, it's really not hard. Just to make it clear, I want you to write about anything up until just before the current topic for this week. So don't incorporate necessarily Alexander the Great and Hellenization in this paper unless you want to. I mean, I don't mind actually. So let's put it this way: you can write about you need to write about everything up to Alexander the Great and Hellenization. That's required, but optionally, you can incorporate that if you want. How do I want you to do this? I don't know. I mean, in a sense, I'm giving you a lot of options, but ultimately, pretend, perhaps, that you're writing to, that somebody is paying you money to explain what you just learned in this class so far, and to teach little tidbits to them of the information that was learned from me, as if you were kind of an outsourced instructor. In other words, I'm wanting you to kind of reiterate back where we're at this time. And so this is what it requires. I'm really, some of you try to do this like you think that I don't notice fluff. You can be a good writer and you can say a lot of things, but ultimately, and that's great, but it needs to demonstrate knowledge of the material. That's what I look to first. When I'm looking at your papers from now on, and I'm going to start grading a little bit harder on this for some of you who are trying to bypass this, don't stress out asking yourself if you're that person. You know if you're actually just trying to, what's that term, BS the professor, okay? I look and when I get your papers, I start trying to look for the information I taught, and I look up and down the paper, and then I actually read what you guys are telling me back, articulating the information that we covered in the class together. Now, when you're just giving me a well-written paper and there's not that content, so I start looking and I'm like, I don't see a date, I don't see a name. I don't see, oh, okay, so you're talking about this subject, but okay, where's the content? And like I said, I'm going to start grading harder on that if I see that pop up more. So make it a habit. Give me content. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Remember, I really don't. And I think that a lot of you are saying this now. If you look, many of you have really high grades, right? Because you're doing the flow, you're getting the flow. Okay, and you're seeing I don't grade real hard, but I am, I have addressed to some of you some of the things that I'd like to see change or look at some of your assignments. Even if I gave you full points, if I recommended something and I still gave you full points, it's kind of a hint that maybe in the future you wouldn't get full points if you don't, kind of acknowledge the feedback that I'm getting. Okay, so that's all. And again, I think you guys are doing great, and not to stress too much. And it looks to me like a lot of you are learning, and so this is exciting. Now, what I did, I changed something from the syllabus. I'm much happier with this. Usually I have you write a paper also on top of an exam on Hellenization. And what I really did is and then I didn't have a discussion. Instead, I actually kept the discussion on the topic and got rid of that paper. So in a sense, this week is like a normal week, except that you have to write a minimum of 2 pages for which is your take-home essay paper exam. Okay. And the discussion is due Sunday, just as well as the paper. That's what's different. But the video notes have to be doing the same as Thursday. Okay. And so that's what just changed a little bit in this week. So I think that's for the better. And there's just a few things. Okay, I want to just address that I saw from some of the notes that you guys wrote that I just want to clarify. The term henotheism, and I used this when we talked about ancient Egypt, isn't really used that much. I think it should be used more. It is an official term, and it's an academic term. But I've actually met professors that are quite knowledgeable that actually aren't familiar with the term henotheism. It's just, for whatever reason, it just hasn't really caught on, and I'm kind of an advocate of the term. So I just want to make that clear. Because henotheism, as we remember, is the idea that someone believes in one God as the main God, but they're not denying the existence of other gods, which is a kind of a different category than, like, say, in Islam, there's just one God, and I mean, like, Satan's not even really a challenge to him as much as just, like it's just God. Judaism is essentially the same, and Christianity, the idea of the Trinity, for many different people, it becomes more of a debate. But ultimately, it's a belief in one God. But having the belief that other gods exist and that are called gods, that's unique, I think, to henotheism. So in other words, what I'm saying is that, actually, there's several things I want to say. The term monotheism, henotheism, and polytheism are taking of Greek words and are used by modern Western academics. The term monotheism doesn't show up in the Bible or the Quran. The concept of God being one does, right? And these are categorical terms that we try to use to create categories. And here's what's kind of interesting, and I don't want to go too long on this, to say that there have been philosophers, especially you had some in the 20th century, that kind of really acknowledge the fact that we come up with certain terms that create an either or, and it maybe like distorts things. So for example, if somebody said you have to be gay or straight, like, what are you, gay or straight? There are people that we now know that view themselves as, let's say, bisexual. Now I know I'm bringing up a controversial topic, but here's my whole point. When you say a person must be in this and a person must be in that, you discount the possibility of something else, a variety that's outside of those categories. And in a certain sense, you're not, like, really being very precise, right? And this is regardless of what you think about these topics. Okay, so it comes to the idea about monotheism, polytheism, and henotheism. Same thing. Okay, so I don't want to belabor this topic. I hopefully didn't make it more confusing for you. But in any case, I just wanted to address that. The other thing is, I pointed out in my notes that Zoroastrianism probably has more of an influence on Christianity than Judaism. I wrote that after my lecture, but a lot of you still said that Zoroastrianism influenced Judaism more. I'm not sure if you didn't read my note, or you just, I'm not sure why, but I just want to clarify that, I mean, if you look at the test, if you study Zoroastrianism's concept of a cosmic battle, of good versus evil, and all of that, it really does have a familiar texture that you see much more in Christianity. Now, that doesn't, I mean, we can take it or leave it of what we think the reasons for that being. But that's something that we see much more similar than, let's say, compared to other religious systems. That's all. That's all I want to say on that. And then there was something else, last thing. There was a Greek thinker that said that Ethiopians view their gods with snub noses, and many of you actually wrote that in there. And I want to say something. Probably no Ethiopians said that. The Greek writers, just like some of our own, this can happen, basically put words in other people's mouths. And it was actually common for Greek historians to write what they think people would have said or should have said. In other words, this wasn't like this. It's not like this Greek writer probably had Ethiopian friends and hung out in Ethiopia. And in fact, actually, the very term Ethiopia may have a much wider range of meaning that doesn't necessarily apply to strictly modern Ethiopia as well. And that's also complicated. I think here's the point that he was trying to make, though, is that his feeling was that what he's saying is, hey, look, we Greeks made our gods look very much like us, don't they? I mean, isn't it interesting that they act and behave? Everything about our Greek gods looks very Greek, but there's a world out there where not everybody looks like that or acts like that. And so he came up with this kind of what we now might see as for some people very simple, is that it's the question, did God make us in God's image, or are we making God in our image? And the conclusion of this Greek thinker was, look, if you're black and you live in Africa and you have gods and you're going to depict them, they're probably going to look more like you. And if we're going to look a certain way, we're going to create gods. And so this is, in a sense, he is really attacking, I would say, maybe the concept of religion and the idea of basically saying that humans create their religion in their own image, not the other way around. That seems to be what he was arguing about. You can agree or disagree with what he's saying, but that is the message that I believe is really being conveyed ultimately. But it was not a precise anthropological, sociological observation of what Ethiopians really thought about their spiritual worldview. Okay, and I think that's all I really wanted to say. I hope that that I've been clear, and yeah, so I guess if you got any more questions, again, keep getting a hold of me, and I will try to be much more responsive. Have a great week, and we'll be in touch.